चलो पहले तो वो करते हैं कि लास्ट टाइम का वो रिवीजन वगैरह, ठीक है। और वो किया कि दैट्स जो क्विक क्विक रिकैप। और लोग कितने हैं, एक सेकंड। अच्छा, दिस वन। अच्छा, मोल्स क्या था कि आई आई टोल्ड यू दैट इट वाज जस्ट अ नंबर, ठीक है, अ वेरी बिग नंबर। वो था फर्स्ट थिंग। इट वाज अ ह्यूज नंबर। वन मोल इसको कहते हैं, ठीक है। वो यू काउंट एटम्स यूजिंग दैट, एंड आई टोल्ड यू हाउ टू कन्वर्ट a number into moles, ठीक है। If you want to convert any number to any unit, so you take that number and you divide it by that unit and you get that particular unit, ठीक है। So if you want to convert any number to moles, you divide it by the Avogadro's number, ठीक है, what a mole is, 6.02 times 10 power 23. अच्छा, that was the first thing, converting into moles. We're going to count everything in moles, ठीक है, that was one thing. फिर ये दूसरा formula था, which is mass over mr. The the purpose of this formula was that basically if you have 1 mole of any substance, its mass is given in the periodic table. Okay, that is known as the molar mass, which is also the atomic mass. Molar mass is the mass of 1 mole of a substance. It's the AR or MR expressed in grams. So it's either if you have 1 mole of Cl2, the mass is given in the periodic table, that's 71 grams. So 1 mole of any substance, its mass would be given in the periodic table and you would know the mass. You get 1 mole of sodium oxide. So 1 mole of CO2, every substance will have a different mass. Okay, 1 dozen eggs, 1 dozen bananas, they will have different masses. Okay, so 1 mole of sodium oxide and 1 mole of carbon dioxide, they're going to have different mass, but the mass is given in the periodic table. Okay, so we did that. और वो जो formula था ना, that was based on that, because if you know 1 mole of substance has this mass, then you would also know 2 moles of substance will have 88 grams, right? Agar 2 moles hota, so it's going to be 88 grams. If it had been 10 moles, it would have been 440 grams. Okay, so the formula moles is equal to mass divided by molar mass. That basically gives you this conversion without going into ratios. You can remember bar ratios karna, that's kind of time consuming. So this formula basically saves you from using ratios. Achha, that's one thing. Uh, Then another formula that we did was about solutions. Okay, all solutions. Solutions are when you have a substance that is mixed in water mostly. Okay, it could be gases. Can be sometimes they use it for gases, but very rarely. Normally, it's something that's used for solutions. So if the particles are like really far away from each other, that means it's dilute. If the particles are like really close to each other and very stacked together, that's concentrated. So what is concentration? It's the number of particles, which you're going to count in moles, divided by the volume of the container. It's the number of particles in a particular volume. If the number of particles is more, that means it's more concentrated. If the number of particles in a particular volume are less, that means it's dilute or less concentrated. So concentration is a simple formula that if you know the number of particles, which you're counting in moles, divide by the volume, it should be in dm cube. So that's what concentration is, moles over volume. Okay, so we did try to calculate the following concentration. Every solution is going to be described by concentration. So it's moles over volume. Okay, so if you know that you have 1.8 moles of NaCl and it's mixed in 1500 cm cube water, so it's 1.8 moles in 1.5 dm cube. That's giving us 1.2 mole per dm cube. Okay. If I have 0.5 moles of HCl mixed in 200 cm cube solution, so that's 0.5 moles. In a dm cube, you divide by 1000, right? There's some grams to kilograms, that's divided by 1000. Cm cube to dm cube is also divided by 1000. So 0.5 moles divided by 0.2 dm cube, and that's 1.5 mole per decimeter cube. Okay. So we did the third formula, and then you had the last formula, the last major formulas. The other formulas as well. The last major formula is that,
Sir,
हाँ जी,
isn't 0.5 over 0.2 2.5?
मुझे कल 1.5 कैसे बताया था? ये मैंने खुद ही लिखा है. 2.5. 5/2, हाँ 2.5 है. पता है? शायद मैंने ही कर दिया होगा 1.5. अच्छा, 2.5 मोल per dm. Anyways, final formula, moles and gases. Moles and gases is कि, and remember this formula is only at room temperature and pressure. Okay, it's only at RTP. RTP stands for, well, it stands for room temperature and pressure. The room temperature is 25 degrees centigrade and the pressure is 1 atmosphere. एक चीज मुझे बस चेक करने दो, ये जो मेरी recent syllabus है ना, just give me 1 second. मैं STB का देख लूं, जो syllabus 0620 कब पेपर दे रहे हैं? 2026. 2026. अच्छा, 2026 2028 का जो सिलेबस है ना, उसमें आई डोंट नो इफ दे हैव, अच्छा STP नहीं आया. स्टैंडर्ड. Just give me 1 second. मुझे शक था 2026 2028 के अंदर उन्होंने शायद ये ऐड किया है. जस्ट in the Cambridge. नहीं, नहीं है, छोड़ दो उसे. तो वो क्लियर हो गया. 2026 2028, that's not there. अच्छा, वो किधर गई मीटिंग, कहाँ गई है ये? अच्छा, so only RTP, ठीक है. Your syllabus only has RTP. Even the latest one, 2026 2028. अच्छा, room temperature and pressure, that's 25 degrees centigrade and 1 atmosphere pressure. अच्छा, what does that mean? It's and remember this, what we're going to talk about, it's only at RTP, uh, because gases, ठीक है, gases can expand or compress. So the volume of a gas can change with temperature and with pressure as well. So the statement is that if you have 1 mole of gas particles, 1 mole of any gas at RTP, it's going to have a fixed volume, which is 24 decimeter cube. The 1 mole of gas, that's a lot of gas particles. So think of a balloon, which is room temperature and pressure. So let's say there's a balloon, and you have 1 mole of gas particles in that balloon. 1 mole ka matlab hai you have a lot of gas particles. 1 mole kya tha? That was 6.02 times, but it was 6. So that's these many gas particles. 6.02 times 10 power 23. That's a huge number of atoms, right? So the balloon will have a size of 24 dm cube. 24 dm cube is 24 liters basically. It's like 24 Pepsi bottles stacked together. So if you have 1 mole of gas, that's 6.02 times 10 power 23 particles. The volume that they're going to occupy at room temperature and pressure, that's going to be 24 decimeter cube. That's just the statement. That's the thing that you need to know. Now, based on that statement, what you can do is that if you have 2 moles of gas, so फिर क्या volume होगा? That's going to be It's pretty obvious. 1 mole of gas occupies a volume of 24 dm cube. 2 moles of gas, that's double the amount, right? So that means your volume is going to be 48 dm cube, right? 3 moles of gas at RTP, right? So what volume would it occupy? It would occupy क्या होता है 24 in times 3, that's going to be 72 dm cube, right? And so on. You have 10 moles of gas, then it will occupy a volume of times 10, that's 10 times, right? 240 dm cube. So it's simple ratios, right? So 1 mole of gas will occupy this particular volume at RTP. That's it. Now, you can summarize this. You can either use ratios or you can come up with this formula, which in that case, you don't have to use ratios. And that is that the moles of a gas, you can remember this is only applicable to a gas. It's the volume of gas in dm cube divided by 24 dm cube. Okay, so that's your formula. So for example, over here, I'm given 72 dm cube, right? So if somebody tells me how many moles do I have, so that would mean 72 divided by 24, and that's going to be equal to 3 moles. If somebody says, okay, I have 240 dm cube of a gas, so how many moles is that? That's going to be 240 divided by 24, and that's going to give you 10 moles, right? So instead of that ratio thing, you can just simply use this formula. Okay, is this clear? The Bira here, Ahmed, Zadar, Rania, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
I said, now we're done with all 4 formulas. And I'm going to write all of them. Okay, so main formulas. I mean, the other formulas as well, but they're not the main thing. So we're going to do the other formulas at the end, but the main formulas are, there are 4 of them. First thing, if you're given the number of particles, divided by the Avogadro's cost, that's formula number 1. Second formula, do you remember mole? The symbol for mole a lot of times is going to be N. The second formula, that's moles divided by the molar mass. क्या formula बना दिया? Mass divided by molar mass. MR or AR. Third formula, that is about concentration, which is, what is concentration of a solution? That's the number of particles in a particular volume. And the volume has to be in decimeter cube. तो थोड़ा इधर कर लेते हैं एक second. And then you have the last formula, which is moles is the volume of gas divided by 24 decimeter cube. So you've got these 4 formulas. This one, the last one, it's only for gases. You remember, this is for gases, the volume of a gas. This one is for solutions. Sometimes for gases, okay, but not always. And remember to take the volume always in dm cube. Make sure you do that. Because you've got all these 4 formulas, and they're used to convert moles. So anything that they're going to ask you, sometimes they're going to ask you for the number of particles. Sometimes they're going to ask you about the mass of the particle, right? Sometimes they might ask you for the concentration of a solution or the volume of a solution. Sometimes they're going to ask you for the volume of a gas or the moles of a gas. So you've got all these 4 formulas that you can use. Okay, so keep those formulas in mind. But before we jump to that, we're going to come to the equation thing first. You can remember all our counting is done in moles. Atoms are counted in moles. molecules are counted in moles. Okay, all the counting is done in moles. So coming back to the equation, and this is how all moles questions are going to be solved. But first to the equation. So I've got a reaction, and that reaction says that there is 6 NOH reacting with 3 Cl2 gas molecules, and they're producing what, 5 NaCl plus NaClO3 plus CH2O. So you've got this equation. And the first thing that we started with moles when we talked about counting atoms and molecules, right? I told you that an equation is like a recipe, and you're counting molecules and atoms in moles. Okay, so an equation tells you the ratio of those atoms or molecules, but the counting is done in moles. So you've got this ratio, which is 6 NaOH react with 3. So it's like a recipe. 6, agar mix karna, you have to add 6 NaOH and you have to add 3 Cl2s. And as a result, what is going to be produced? 5 NaCls and 1 NaClO3, and there's going to be 3 H2O. So an equation is like a cooking recipe. Now, in all of your moles questions, all of them, they're all going to be solved in exactly the same way. Out of these 5 things, they'll give you the amount of or the quantity of one thing. I mean, let's say they give you a quantity of one thing, right? For example, they tell you that they have how many moles? Let's say they have इसको कोई value दे देते हैं. Yeah, एक second में देना, I have to attend a call. Sorry. So you have the recipe. I said, now remember your atoms are going to be counted in moles. So let's say you have 60 moles of NaOH, right? So पहले तो ratio simple कर लेते हैं. You've got 60 moles, right? So if you're good with ratios, so what is the amount? So remember what they're going to do in all questions is that they'll give you some information or some idea about the moles of one of the things in the whole reaction. So if you know that 60 moles of NaOH are reacting, you would, by using ratios, ratio simply क्या होता है? 6:3, right? 6 react with 3. So 60 moles would react with how many? That's going to be X, and you're going to use ratios, and it's going to be 60 moles times 3 is equal to 6X, and you're going to take the 6 on the other side, and it's going to give you 30 moles, right? Okay, again, if you're good with moles, if you're good with the ratios, you would obviously know that that's 30 moles. Okay. So what amount of NaCl would be produced? That's going to be 50 moles, right? And what amount of NaClO3 would be produced? That's going to be 10 moles. And what amount of water would be produced? That's going to be 30 moles. Okay, so the point is that if you know the actual quantity that's being used of any one of the reactants, then using that, you're able to figure out what is the quantity of the other reactants or products that are formed. Okay. But for example, if you know that one car, if you want to make one car, you need 5 tires and you need 4 doors and you need और क्या होता है कार में? Two headlights, right? So if you know, let's say 2 headlights, right? So if I want to make 20 cars, then I would know the rest as well, right? I would know that if one car requires 5 tires, 20 would require, if you're good with ratios, it's going to be 100 tires, right? We check, we can double check. One car needs 4 doors, right? So 20 cars would need 80 doors, right? One car needs 2 headlights, right? So 20 cars would need, कितनी हो जाएगी? That's going to be 80, right? So is this clear? Okay, all moles questions are going to be solved in exactly the same way that you would be given the moles of one of the substances, and by using ratios, you'll be able to figure out the moles of all the other ones. Okay? Emma, is this clear here? The beta, is this clear? Claudia, clear? अच्छा
Yes.
अब ठीक है तो पहले तो you have to be good with ratios. Now, so I'm going to rub all of this. So you have to be good with ratios. And remember, all moles questions will be solved in exactly the same way. You would know the moles of one thing, and based on that, you'll be able to figure out the moles of all the other things using ratios. So now this is easy moles. I mean, the ratios were easy. What if we now you have to remember you have to be quick as well. I mean, there are too many ratios involved. नहीं नबीरा कौन सी चीज मैं वो बता देता हूँ चलो इजी करके बता देता हूँ कि कोई भी रिएक्शन या कुकिंग रेसिपी है ना इफ यू हैव एनी कुकिंग रेसिपी सिंपल रिएक्शन कर लेते हैं I've got 2Na reacting with 1Cl2, right? And it's producing 2 NaCls. So क्या ratio है? It's कि recipe के it's 2 Nas and you need 1Cl2 and it's going to produce 2 NaCl. तब ratio क्या है? Like if I have 4 sodiums, so Cl2 कितने चाहिए होंगे? That's going to be 2. And NaCl, how much NaCl will be produced? 4. I mean, that's simple ratios. कि if you don't know how to do that, 2 Nas, they require 1 Cl2 to react with. That's what the equation is telling you. The equation is the simplest ratio in which things are going to react. So, agar 4 given hai, so you're going to use 4. So, how much Cl2 would be required? That's going to be x, and you're going to cross multiply, and it's going to be 2x is equal to 4, okay, and then it's going to be divided by 2, and it's going to give you 2. So, that means the amount of Cl2 that's needed, that's going to be 2. Nabila, is this part clear? अच्छा फिर इसका अगले का निकालना है कि what amount of NaCl would be produced, right? So you can use any ratios, right? So let's rub this off. 1 Cl2 produces how much NaCl? 2 NaCl, right? So if I want to produce, if I'm using 2 Cl2s, so what amount of NaCl would be produced? That's going to be, well, the cross multiply, do the math, it's going to come out to be uh, x is equal to 4 हो जाएगा, ठीक है? So it's going to come out to be 4, right? So the amount of NaCl that's going to be produced is 4. So the point is, जो equation होती है ना, that's the simplest ratio in which things are going to react. Take 2 sodiums, react it with 1 Cl2, and it will produce 2 NaCls. If you take 4 sodiums, it will require 2 Cl2s, and it will produce 4 NaCls. It's going to be exactly the same ratio. If you take 20 sodiums, it will react with 10 Cl2s, and it will produce 20 NaCls. ठीक है? तो नबीना ये clear है कि the ratio, अब मैं जो important चीज बात कर रहा था ना वो ये था कि all moles questions are going to work kind of the same way. What that means is okay, the equation will tell you the simplest ratio in which things will react. पूरी equation में he'll give you the moles of one thing. For example, he tells us that this is 5 moles. The amount of Cl2 is 5 moles. They tell us. तो फिर Na कितने होंगे? You're going to use ratio, right? 1 reacts with 2. So that means the amount of Na would be double, right? The amount of Na would be double. So कितना हो जाएगा? 5 का double क्या होगा? That's going to be 10, right? And same on the other side. 1 Cl2 produces how many NaCl? 2 NaCl, right? Double. So 5, if you use 5, it's going to produce double the amount, and that's going to be 10 moles. Okay? So every moles question would be solved in exactly the same way. They'll give you the moles of any one of these substances. or using ratios, you'll be able to figure out the moles of all the other ones. Clear it, Beta? ठीक है? Acha, but there would be a lot of ratios involved. So I'm basically jumping to the next thing, which is that if the ratios are kind of complicated, for example, yeah, complicated ratio. So let's say we've got a slightly complicated ratio, for example, Al plus O2, and it's forming Al2O3. And if you balance this equation, 2 and there's going to be 4Al and there's going to be 3O2, right? So the recipe is that there's going to be 4Al reacting with 3O2 gas molecules and it's producing 2 Al2O3 molecules. Okay, so it's 4:3:2, right? A question winner is going to give you moles of one thing. Okay, for example, he says that this is 0.15 moles. You can remember all the counting is done in moles. So they'll give you moles of one thing and you'll be asked to figure out the moles of all the other things. Now that requires, well, you basically have to do ratios now, okay? What are the ratios that are involved? The ratio is that 3O2 gas molecules produce 2 Al2O3. So the ratio is 3:2, right? So 3 produces 2. So if you have 0.15, it will produce X on the other side. And you're going to cross multiply. And the answer would come out to be 3x is equal to 2 times 0.15. And take the 3 on the other side. That's going to give you, मुझे तो क्या value आ रही है? What do you get for this? Ahmed, क्या आ रहा है? Yeah, any idea what this is? What's 2 times 0.15
So 0
or
0.1.
what is it?
0.1.
That's 0.1. You're getting 0.1, right? So that means this is 0.1 moles, right? I said, but the trouble is that you had to like do ratios. You had to do ratios. Same on this side as well. I said you can pick any ratios. You can pick these two and then compare, right? So it's your choice. It doesn't really make a difference. I said, so I need to find this now. So I can compare these ratios, right? And I'm going to figure out what that question mark is. Or I can pick this ratio and I can figure out what the question mark is. So it's your choice. So this one, 3 reacts with 4. Okay, so the ratio is 3 reacts with 4. So if I have 0.15, how much would it react with? That's X, that's unknown, that's the question mark. I'm going to cross multiply. It's going to be 3x is equal to 0.15 times 4. And then I would have to divide this by 3. So anyone, what do we get? 0.15 times 4 कितना होता है?
0.2.
Confirm is 0.2. तो ठीक है 0.2. That's 0.2 moles. So पहले तो is this clear कि you had the moles of one thing and you were able to figure out the moles of the other things. The equation told you the ratio in which they're going to react. Is that clear?
जी.
Achha, the next thing is, the only thing is I don't like this ratio thing. Okay, the ratio thing that we did, I just don't like the maths. There's a quick shortcut for that. Hopefully, I mean, you've studied ratios so much in math. Even if you, I mean, you would be able to do the ratio thing. But my only problem is I don't like doing the math. I just want to be quick. In the exam, you won't really have a lot of time to do all this math. So there's a quick shortcut of doing all of this, and that is, because remember, you have to be quick. You can't waste time calculating ratios. So how would you be quick? So if you want to find the moles of this thing, okay, don't use ratios. There's this quick shortcut, which is this. You take these moles, like if you know the moles of any one of the substance, take those moles, divide it by the ratio of that substance, and multiply it by the ratio of the other substance. So that's the quick ratio thing. So this is going to be 0.15 divided by 3 times 2. Okay, so without doing that whole ratio thing, take the known moles, divide it by its own ratio, multiply it by the ratio of the other substance, and you will get the moles. So if I want to find this one, right, take the known moles, divide it by its own ratio, multiply it by the ratio of the other thing. Okay, so it's going to be 0.15 divided by 3 times 4. Okay, that will give you the exact same answer as well. So is this clear? Is the shortcut clear that, okay, the shortcut is instead of using ratios and making the question very complicated and wasting too much time on this, the shortcut is you know these moles, divide by its ratio, multiplied by the ratio of the other substance, and you'll get the answer. You want to find this? Take the known moles, divide it by its ratio, multiply it by the, तो यहाँ पे मैं लिख भी देता हूँ. So take the known moles, divide it by its own ratio, and multiply it by the other ratio. By the ratio of the substance. Whose moles you're trying to find. Whose moles you're trying to find. So I'm going to apply this trick over here as well. Okay, so same thing over here. I'm just going to use the shortcut, which is, so for example, I know what the reaction is. I know what the ratios are. So if somebody tells me that this is NaCl is 0.8 moles, and I want to find out the other ones, right? So take the known moles, divide it by its own ratio, multiply it by the other substance ratio, right? So I'm going to take 0.8, divide it by 2, and multiply by 1. You get 0.8 divided by 2 times 1. So much quicker, instead of doing all that ratio thing. The other one, I want to find that one. Take the known moles, divide by its ratio, multiply it by the other ratio. So that will pretty much give me the same answer. So it's going to be 0.8 divided by 2 times 2. And this becomes much more convenient if the equation is big and there are too many ratios involved. So if somebody says that the amount of NaCl that is being produced in the reaction is, let's say, 3.5 moles. That's the amount of NaCl. And they're asking you to figure out the moles of all the other substances. Then doing the ratio thing is going to be very quick. You can take the moles, the known moles, divide it by its ratio, multiplied by the other substances ratio, right? So this thing over here would become what? It's going to be 3.5 divided by 5.
2.1.
So divide by 5 times 3, right? ये क्या होगा? It's going to be 3.5 divided by 5 times 6. So 3.5 divided by 5 times 6, right? What is this going to be? Take the known moles divided by 5 times the other ratio, right? So it's going to be 3.5 divided by 5 times 1. What's the last one? This one. It's going to be take 3.5 divided by 5 times 3. So this one is 3.5 divided by 5 times 3. Okay. So remember, you can waste your time doing ratios, but you can learn the shortcut, which is this. So everything would be a lot faster. Okay, and you'll be able to figure out the moles of all the substances. Okay, all of these are moles. ये clear है? Is this thing clear?
Yes. जी.
So, अच्छा तो I'll एक दो और कर लेते हैं. Mg plus H3PO4 and it's forming Mg3PO4 twice. Let's remember, all moles questions are to quite an extent just this. You just have to do this. The rest is just formulas, okay? That we'll come to later. But the concept behind all moles question is kind of the same. I say reaction. I know what the ratio is. It's the simplest ratio is 3:2:1:3. So if somebody tells me that this is 0.12 moles, मतलब एक के पता है, ठीक है? So if I know the moles of any one of the substances, I'll be able to figure out the moles of all the other ones. So ये क्या होगा? This one, 0.12 divided by 2 times 3. So that would be 0.12 divided by what, 2 and times 3. What would be this? It's going to be 0.12 divided by 2 times 1. So that's 0.12 divided by 2 times 1. What's this last one? That's going to be 0.12 divided by 2 times 3. Okay, so instead of wasting time on ratios, pretty straightforward. ये क्या values क्या आ रही हैं? How many moles is this? The first one. Is this 0.18? कितना आ रहा? 0.15 or 0.18? 12 into 3, that's 0.18 over. 36 divided by 2. This would be 0.06. And this would be, अच्छा पहला ये आखिरी, ठीक है, they're the same, 0.18 moles. ठीक है, is this clear?
Yes.
और बाकी question simple है. The rest of the question is pretty simple. Okay, they might ask you to figure out what is the volume of H2 gas. Well, if you know moles, so we have a formula of finding the volume of gas. If you know moles, you can figure out the volume of gas. If you know moles, you can figure out concentration or you can figure out volume. If you know moles, you can figure out the mass, right? If you know moles, you can figure out the number of particles. So once you know moles, you will be able to figure out kind of everything, okay, in the question. So the rest is just applying formula. So we'll do that tomorrow then, okay? So okay, everyone. Let's continue tomorrow then.
Love, sir.
Okay.
Love.